Good evening, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about a classic Vietnam War film that is famous for its realistic battlefield restoration, Hamburger Hill. Released in 1987 and directed by John Irvin, this film does not pursue grand war scenes or exaggerated heroism, but focuses on the most authentic cruelty of war and the survival dilemma of soldiers, restoring the bloody Battle of Hamburger Hill that happened in May 1969 with almost documentary-like rigor. In the next 5 minutes, we will walk into this meat grinder on the battlefield, review the historical background behind it, and feel the shocking power of reality contained in the film. First, let's sort out the historical context of the Battle of Hamburger Hill. By 1969, the Vietnam War had entered its most stalemated stage. 2 years earlier, the Tet Offensive launched by the North Vietnamese Army dealt a heavy blow to the U.S. military, making the American public realize that this war would never be an easy victory. Domestically, the anti-war movement was surging, and more people began to question the significance of the U.S. military's presence in Vietnam. At that time, the U.S. military in Vietnam implemented a maximum pressure strategy, aiming to eliminate the effective forces of the North Vietnamese Army through active attacks and force them to collapse first. Under this strategy, the A Shau Valley in central Vietnam became a key battleground for both sides. Located near the border between South Vietnam and Laos, the A Shau Valley was an important node of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a vital supply line for the North Vietnamese Army to transport troops and materials to South Vietnam. The U.S. military had launched several cleanup operations here before, but all failed to achieve significant results. By May 1969, this valley, with dangerous terrain and convenient transportation, had become a solid forward base for the North Vietnamese Army. To cut off this supply line once and for all, the U.S. military launched Operation Apache Snow, and the core task was to capture Hill 937, the highest peak in the A Shau Valley, a mountain ridge with an altitude of 937 meters, later known to the world as Hamburger Hill. The film's restoration of the battlefield starts with the details of the troops. The main force of the U.S. military in the battle was the 3rd Battalion, 187th Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division, known as the Screaming Eagles. The film opens with 5 new recruits joining the platoon, and the squad leader gives them a hasty battlefield training, which is exactly the real situation of the U.S. military at that time. Due to the long-term war, the troops were short of manpower, and many recruits were sent to the front line without sufficient training. What's more authentic is that the film does not avoid the racial discrimination that existed in the U.S. military at that time. Black soldiers and white soldiers faced unequal treatment, but in the cruel battle, they had to rely on each other to survive, which added a layer of realism to the story. When it comes to the restoration of the battle process, Hamburger Hill can be called a live textbook of war films. The film faithfully reproduces the steep and harsh terrain of Hill 937, dense jungles, elephant grass taller than armored vehicles, narrow and slippery mountain roads, and the U.S. military could only launch attacks in company and platoon units, unable to deploy large forces. The North Vietnamese Army had long built elaborate fortifications on the mountain, including trenches, bunkers and tunnels, and adopted the tactics of defending key points and attacking reinforcements, waiting for the U.S. military to attack. In the film, we can see that every time the U.S. soldiers climbed a step, they would be greeted by dense machine gun fire and rain of grenades. The airstrikes and artillery bombardments that the U.S. military relied on often failed to hit the hidden bunkers of the North Vietnamese Army, and even caused friendly fire several times. One of the most shocking scenes in the film is the reproduction of the friendly fire incident. On the second day of the attack, 2 AH-1 Cobra attack helicopters of the U.S. military, due to communication errors, poured all their ammunition on the U.S. soldiers who were climbing the mountain, killing 2 and wounding 35. This scene is not a Hollywood adaptation, but a real historical fact. The film also restores the cruelty of close combat. Soldiers fight hand-to-hand in the jungle, the sound of bayonets stabbing into flesh, the wails of the wounded, and the bodies scattered on the mountain, all of which are exactly the memories of the veterans who participated in the battle. A sergeant who survived once recalled, "Have you ever been inside a hamburger machine? We just got cut to pieces by extremely accurate machine gun fire, which is why Hill 937 was named Hamburger Hill. The soldiers who fought here were like meat being ground up. The film also does not avoid the futility of this battle. After 11 days of bloody fighting, the US military finally captured Hill 937 on May 20, 1969, paying a heavy price of 56 killed, 367 wounded and 7 missing. However, just 2 weeks later, because the mountain had little strategic value and was difficult to defend, the US military had to abandon it, and the North Vietnamese army soon reoccupied the area. This futile battle became a turning point in the US military's involvement in the Vietnam War. After that, the US military no longer adhered to the maximum pressure strategy, and this battle also became the last large-scale ground offensive of the US military in the Vietnam War. What makes Hamburger Hill stand out among many Vietnam War films is that it does not glorify war or shape perfect heroes. It just shows the fear, confusion, courage and friendship of ordinary soldiers in the war. The soldiers in the film are not fearless warriors. They will be afraid of death, miss their families, and complain about the meaninglessness of the war, but when the battle comes, they still rush forward for their comrades in arms. The film's realistic shooting style, without any romanticization, makes every audience feel the cruelty of war deeply. War is not a story of heroes, but a tragedy of countless ordinary people being involved in it. Looking back at this battle and this film, we can understand that the significance of Hamburger Hill is not to show the victory or defeat of a battle, but to remind us of the pain and cost of war. The Battle of Hamburger Hill is a microcosm of the Vietnam War, a war that lacks clear goals, a war that brings endless pain to both sides, and a war that makes people rethink the meaning of peace. The film uses the most authentic battlefield restoration to tell us that behind every casualty figure is a living life, and peace is never something that can be taken for granted. That's all for today's commentary. Through Hamburger Hill, we not only see a bloody battle in history, but also feel the weight of peace. May we always remember the lessons of war and cherish the peaceful life we have now. Thank you.